I think it's a very good question because for the longest time I didn't know what kind of book it was. I knew it had fantastical elements, but I was always hesitant to call it a fantasy because it's very grounded in reality, which is kind of how I like my magic. It's kind of a fairy tale in a way, and it's a little bit I wanted to have a sort of classic storytelling feeling where it really felt like someone was telling you a story and had that timeless quality to it as well.
So the storytelling is essential.
Yes. I think it is in a way a story about stories.
A story about stories.
Yes, because I wanted to have I've been a reader all my life, and stories are very important to me, and there's a storytelling element within the story of the circus, and I wanted it to very much be a place-based story where all the people involved each have their own story, and it's not one person's story, it's how all of these people's stories overlap.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the story you're
I always avoid talking
telling.
like
A
a
little
bit about
tiny
it, just a little bit of the thing, because I think it is a difficult book to encapsulate in that nice little idea of it. But on the surface, it's a story about a black and white nocturnal Victorian traveling circus, and within that circus there is a competition going on between two magicians who do actual magic and who have been raised since childhood to act out their father's rivalry as far as whose school of magical thinking is superior. And I think at its heart it's a story about love and about choices and about all the shades of gray between the black and white.
I think my feeling was that it's a book about magic too.
It's definitely a book about magic, and I think sometimes people ask me if I believe in magic, and I always say yes, because I think a belief in magic is in my mind a belief that extraordinary things are possible, and I think extraordinary things are most definitely possible, and everything that's happened to me recently is proof of that.
Extraordinary things like, for instance,
anything, like just
anything is possible. When you believe
I
in
am
magic,
anything is possible kind of person. I don't like to say that like certain things are impossible. I think certain things are complicated, but I think that there's more that's possible than that's not.
one of the characters in your book says people want to see. People see what they want to see, or even worse, they see what they're told
Yes.
to see. Is that your feeling too?
I think with some people, yes. I think it takes a certain type of thinking to see beyond like what you're given and to look at to think about it in a different way, or to look at things from a different perspective instead of just accepting things the way they appear, which I think a lot of magic in a traditional sense with the tricks of the light and smoke and mirrors is about what you're seeing and not really what's happening.
Did you write a book in a tradition, in a literary tradition?
I don't think so. I was just trying to write a story. I think there are influences, especially in classical influences, and there's definitely a Shakespearean influence with little allusions here and there to The Tempest and to Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, there is a Prospero.
Yes, there is a character named after Prospero the Enchanter, and there are a few little Tempest jokes about why his daughter's not named Miranda. But I didn't try to make it be a proper retelling. I just kind of liked the allusions, and I like Shakespearean sort of. It has such a nice scope and epic that the drama of a Shakespearean story is, I think, something I kind of wanted to capture. And I think there's also maybe like a little bit of a Charles Dickens influence, and getting a little more modern. And definitely a Roald Dahl kind of whimsical bit around the edges as well.
Okay. Yeah, the book made me also think of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, for
Yes,
instance.
the magical realism sort of idea, I think. I sometimes joke that I thought I had a little too much magic to be magical realism, that I was more realistic magicism, which is not a thing, but it definitely has an influence. And I like magic that feels possible, and fantasy that seems close to reality. And I would rather have a circus that could appear in your own backyard than someplace that feels far away. I didn't want that far off fantasy land idea with dragons and that seems like it's very far away. I wanted
That's too far away.
Yes, it's too far away. I like it closer to home.
And but what makes magic so important to you?
I think I've always kind of had that. It's appealing to me as something.
What's the appeal?
It captures my imagination. Maybe I haven't really stopped to think about it. It's
You stopped to think about it?
I should think about it more. I think.
Okay.
I think I've always enjoyed stories and fairy tales and those elements that add something else that isn't just the everyday. It makes things kind of more special and sparkle and adds another element.
My feeling is that magic is there because we want to beat death, or we want to manipulate reality, or we are unhappy with reality.
I don't think I like magic because I'm unhappy with reality. I think I like thinking that there could be more beneath the surface that people just are unaware of, that potential for things that are quote unquote magical. I don't think it's necessary, but I like wondering if it's there.
Okay, and there's more from a religious point of view, or?
Maybe a little bit. I have kind of a very wide-scoping religious point of view. I've studied world religions and that sort of thing. So I'm very interested in how different cultures and different people think about the same sort of like the why are we here, like what does it mean sort of ideas. And I don't think there are any really definitive answers, but I like that people are thinking about it.
The book is also about the power of love, I think.
Yes, definitely. That theme actually came out rather late in the development and the writing. I'd been working on it long before there was the core love story, and I think that was what was missing. And once that kind of fell into place, I thought the story made a lot more sense, and it is something that I think it's a love story in a lot of different ways. There's a main romance, but I also think it's about loving a place, because I think that the love story between some of the characters and the circus itself is just as important as the romance. But I think it's very important. I have my necklace actually says "Love conquers all" in Latin, so it is a very important theme, I think, in my writing.
Before you became a writer, you were in theater or in art?
My background's in theater. I studied theater in college and made the rather unfortunately timed decision right after I graduated that I didn't feel like doing theater anymore.
Why didn't you like doing
I
theater
never
anymore?
found that one theater thing I wanted to do. I had acted, I directed, I studied lighting design, which I think is probably comes through in the book a little bit. I'm always concerned about how scenes are lit. But I think to pursue theater professionally, you really have to have a passion for that one sort of thing to really focus on, and I wasn't focused enough to really work on it in a professional capacity. So I stopped, and I kind of spent my 20s kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I started painting again, and I started writing. So the writing took off.
And what made you start writing?
I was always the kind of person who thought about writing and didn't actually write. I would think, oh, I would like to write, but then I would write about a page and I'd hate it, so I'd stop writing. And I actually, in around 2003, started doing something called National Novel Writing Month. It's not national, it is international. The name is a lie, but it's actually every November.
That's a course. Or?
Yes, it's an online-based challenge to write 50,000 words of fiction in 30 days, which is a lot of words and not a lot of time. But what it does is it gives you a deadline that other people on the internet are holding you to, and it you have to write so much that I didn't have time to be so self-critical about what I was writing, and it was a really good way for me to learn to write, because I just would just write and write and write, and it wouldn't all be good.
In the writing in the word production.
Yes, it's and so that's where this book started. The very beginning stages, about 2005. I got very bored with what I was writing that particular year. And
What did you write before?
I was writing sort of. I have one that's like sort of one of those post-apocalyptic things, and
a book.
It's not a book shape. It's stuff. It's not really
Bits
shaped like a book.
Okay.
I definitely am a bits and pieces kind of writer. And this book was the first one I actually got to be properly book shaped eventually. But I kind of my imagination works in such a way that entire worlds sort of spring into my head fully formed, and I spend a lot of time exploring them, trying to figure out where the story is.
And how do you do that?
Trial and error.
What happens in your head? Could you? Can you explain that to me?
Sometimes I just need to follow story threads with, and I think a lot of my writing starts location-based with the circus in particular. It started with the idea of the circus.
Okay.
So what I did was
And do you remember why it started with the idea of the circus?
I do remember why, because I was writing something different. I was writing, it had no plot. Nothing was happening. It was kind of an Edward Gorey-inspired thing. That was the tone I was looking for, and it had mysterious guys in fur coats being mysterious and not really doing anything else. So out of desperation, needing something to happen, I sent my characters to the circus. And the circus was immediately much more interesting, so I kind of abandoned that beginning of a story and just focused on the circus. I had this image in my head of these rings of striped tents and this bonfire in the center, and I wanted to figure out what this space was, and kind of populated it with performers and knew it had to have people who created it, and that's where Chandresh came from as a character, and that's where the entire story developed, was from the setting itself. So that's kind of how my process works. It's probably not the most straightforward of writing processes, but it's more like excavating a space as I write.
Yeah. And where did this mysterious atmosphere of night come in?
I think I always had the idea, I wanted it to have a very distinct visual style, and that's where the idea of having everything be black and white came from. And I think there's something kind of very evocative about a nighttime space rather than a daytime circus. And I think a lot of circus traditionally there is that nighttime carnival idea, but I think it's not necessarily associated with a purely nocturnal idea. But I liked it to do something that was a little more elegant than a traditional circus, kind of a circus dressed in evening wear. So I think it lent itself well to being only open at night.
And it's not a mirror for everyday boring life reality where nothing is possible.
No, it's definitely a sort of anything is possible space with a sort of different wonders encased in different tents, and I really wanted to do something that
a realm of dreams.
Yes, that felt very dreamlike, and I think that my theater background comes into play again. That I like an experience that's an entertainment that it is fully encompassing, that you feel immersed in as you're experiencing it, and I think the idea of a circus lends itself well to that, where you have the entire world that you enter. And I think my circus isn't really a traditional circus. There are no clowns, and I've yet had a single complaint that there are no clowns in my circus. No one seems to really like clowns when it comes down to it. But
Clowns are sad.
Either sad or people are scared of them. It's just like, I figured I'd just avoid clowns entirely, and that seemed to work well. But it's almost more performance art or installation art encased in the trappings of a circus.
And colors are extremely important, I think, in the book.
Mm-hmm. I'm a very visual person, so I'm always thinking in terms of what things look like, and from how they're lit to especially the color scheme. And I wanted, because the circus was black and white, I think the use of color had to be even more particular, and that there are definitely colorful parts of the book. But
The book is sold to, I think, 30 countries or more.
It's around 30, I think, at this point. Yes, I lost count after a while.
Is there an explanation for your popularity around the world?
I'm not sure. I never.
Did you ever speculate?
We surpassed wildest dreams a very long time ago. I wanted it to be an actual book. When I was writing it, that was my main goal, to have it even be publishable. What was as far forward as I was thinking. So the response and the scale of the response has just been overwhelming. And I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure what I did, but I'm glad I did it. And I think part of the appeal might be I wasn't trying to write it to be an American book or a European book, and the circus kind of travels and has different influences, and I wanted it to have that sort of classic fairy tale where it didn't seem tied to one place, and I think that might have some influence on the appeal it's having in a lot of different countries.
Could maybe one of the explanations be that we all have in common, whatever country we come from, that we want to escape from reality?
I do think the escapism part is definitely true, because I think that's kind of a universal idea, that like wanting to escape into something, and sometimes people say that it's because of modern times and the economy, and people want like a fantasy to escape to, but I've always liked books that feel like some place to go. Like a book feels like a journey, regardless of whether or not you need an escape from your everyday. I think it can be fun just to take a journey into the world of a story, just for the sake of visiting that particular story.
And writing, is it escape?
I think so. I think there's a lot of story in my head, and I think writing is a good way for me to kind of process all that. And it definitely feels to me sometimes when I'm writing that it is like being somewhere else. Which sounds a little weird, I think. Just in a general sense, it's probably a strange sort of thing to kind of need to disappear into things that I make up in my head. But I think it's taken me a long time to kind of figure out what kind of writer I am. But I think I'm kind of getting the hang of it at this point.
Will there be a next book, or are you returning to being an artist or theatre maybe?
I am working on another book. I haven't had a lot of time to work on it right now because they're keeping me very busy with this one. But I am working on something that's still fantastical, but is a very different style. It's a bit of a film noir influenced Alice in Wonderland. So I'm working kind of more in a 30s, 40s Art Deco rather than the Victoriana, which is it's interesting to be sort of playing with a different style and palette. And I'm looking forward to having more time to explore it. It's still very much in that exploration phase.